So getting your first Google AdSense check from your YouTube channel is a big deal. For many creators, this really shows them the potential that there is to make some serious money on the YouTube platform. And while the amount might seem small in some cases, maybe it's only $100, it really shows that there is proof of concept and the ability to make money exists on the platform. But if you're getting paid, so is your partner in crime, Uncle Sam. So let's talk about the taxes on your first YouTube paycheck. So starting off here, how much are YouTube taxes actually? Well, there are going to be at least two different taxes that you're going to be paying on your YouTube income. The first of which is going to be income taxes. The second of which is going to be self-employment taxes. And I say potentially two because there might be a third state income tax depending on where you actually live. Here in the state of New York, we've got about an 8 to 9% state income tax. So I get to add that on top of my earnings that I make on the YouTube platform. Now, while this might seem a little bit intimidating, these types of taxes are actually fairly straightforward, so let's dive into each of them very, very quickly. In terms of income taxes, these are going to be the same income taxes you would pay if you were an employee. They're going to be based off of your tax brackets, which if you don't understand, I've got a full video breaking those down up here. But the main difference is that there's going to be no withholding, okay? Because YouTube does not withhold any of your income for taxes like an employer would, okay? With YouTube, you are not an employee of YouTube. You are just an independent contractor that happens to work on the platform. So YouTube is going to give you all of the money minus their cut that they're taking out of your AdSense. And then you are going to have to ration that money and figure out how to pay Uncle Sam when he comes knocking. Now, in general, it's actually gonna be a good idea to withhold money from yourself. We're gonna talk a bit more about what that means in a little bit here, but just know that you can actually do some withholding. You're just gonna have to do it yourself. Now, in terms of self-employment taxes, these are a bit of a misnomer because you also pay these as an employee, except they are called payroll taxes when you're paying them at work. These cover things like Social Security and Medicare, and are typically going to be a flat 15.3% of your income. Now, this is due to the nature of how self-employment taxes actually work. So if you're an employee and you're paying payroll taxes, that is only half of the tax bill, because what the government's going to do is they're going to have your employer pay half and they're going to have you pay half. So when you're paying half, it's about 7.6% taxes as an employee. But when you are self-employed, when you're working on YouTube, you are seen as the employer and the employee. So you're paying both halves of those taxes. That's where your 7.65% increases up to 15.3% because you're paying both halves of that tax. Hopefully that makes some sense and it didn't just confuse you. But if I did, I've got a whole video on self-employment taxes as well that you can feel free to check out. And in general, it's going to be best to self-withhold here as well because nobody is going to be withholding income for you unless you decide to do it yourself. So now that you know what types of taxes you're going to be paying, let's talk about how to actually get that money to the government. Well, employees have the luxury of only really having to worry about taxes once a year, okay, because their employer's withholding money for them all year, and then April 15th comes around and they kind of just settle up. Okay, did I pay too much? Did I not pay enough? They kind of settle up with Uncle Sam, and then they move on to next year, they do it all again. But as a self-employed person, as someone who's working on YouTube, you have the luxury of worrying about taxes 4 times per year instead of just one. That is thanks to what are called quarterly estimated tax payments. I promise these aren't as intimidating as they sound. See, because the IRS is not really content to just wait for your taxes once a year, because if no one's withholding money and sending it off to them, they don't want to get paid once a year, okay? They got bills to pay, they got to keep the lights on, they got to pay all the people down in Washington, okay? So they got to make sure that they are getting their money, and so they've decided that 4 times per year, they're going to come knocking and ask you to pay them. Now, the easiest way to take care of this is to go to the IRS's website and make a payment there. You can also do it over the phone, you could also do it in the mail, but in general, the easiest way is just go to the IRS website. It's irs.gov/payments, and then make a quarterly estimated tax payment. Now, the word estimated there is pretty important because they don't expect you to actually know exactly how much you're going to owe in taxes, because if you're paying midway through the year, you don't know what tax bracket you're going to fall into, you don't know how much money you're going to make that year. So they're allowing you to just make an estimate, and as long as you're within a reasonable range, they're not going to give you any fees, penalties, whatever, because they know that you tried your best. Now, in order to figure out how to try your best, there is a form called the 1040-ES. ES stands for estimated, and so filling out that form is going to kind of give you a feel for how much you should be sending off to the IRS in those quarterly payments, or if you work with a tax professional, they're going to be able to help you out with that as well. So now that you know what kind of taxes you're going to owe on that first YouTube paycheck and how to actually pay them, I'm going to give you a couple more YouTube tax tips, because this first YouTube paycheck is hopefully going to be the first of many. And so there's a couple things you should keep in mind as you go forward to just make your tax life so much easier when it comes to the money you're making on YouTube. Now, the first thing that is very, very important is that you keep good records for your YouTube channel. This is both your income and your expenses. Now, this is important for a number of reasons, but one of which is because if you don't have records of your expenses, you're going to lose out on a ton of deductions deductions and write-offs because you won't actually be able to prove them. Okay, if the IRS came knocking and said, hey, why'd you take this deduction? If you can't prove that, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So make sure that you're able to keep good records. And what I would say for this is you're going to want to set up a business bank account exclusively for your YouTube channel. I've got a link down in the description for the one that I personally use. I find it to be very, very useful. You're going to want to set one of these things up. You're going to want to have all of your YouTube AdSense income, all your sponsorship income, all that YouTube income come into this account, and then all your YouTube expenses should come out of this account, okay? That's going to make it so much easier for you to do your accounting. You're going to see all the things that came in, all the things that went out. It's going to be so much easier for you, or if you work with a tax professional, for them to just make sense of your whole YouTube income situation. And again, as the checks get bigger, as the spending goes up, you're really, really, really going to thank yourself if you have a separate bank account for your YouTube expenses. Now, the next tax tip is to do what I said before and self-withhold from yourself, okay? Because as someone who makes money on YouTube, you don't have an employer withholding money for you. You want to do that yourself, because if you don't, tax time's going to come around, you're going to owe potentially 30, 40, 50, 60% of your income in taxes, and you're going to have no idea where to find that because you have spent it all. So make sure that you are self-withholding. What I do for this is I've got my YouTube bank account, okay, where all the YouTube income comes in, all the expenses go out. I've got another bank account that is just for taxes. It's with a whole different bank that I only log on to 4 times a year to pay my quarterly payments. And it's with this other bank, so I just, whenever I get paid into my YouTube account, I take a certain percentage, usually it's about 30% of that income, I ship it straight off to the tax account. I don't look at it. It just sits in there. It's actually a high yield account, so it grows for me a little bit. And then when tax time comes around, I cross my fingers, I log onto that bank, and I hope that I have enough money in there to pay my taxes. If I don't, it's a lot easier to come up with that little extra percent than it is to come up with all of the money from scratch. So I definitely say, if you're just getting started making money on YouTube, setting up that separate account with a separate bank to just ship your money off to every time it comes in is going to be very, very worthwhile to do. And you're going to thank yourself when your quarterly tax payments do come around. Now that you're making money on YouTube, the next thing you should do is check out this video over here where I talk about the 4 steps you should follow when you're getting paid on YouTube. There's a very specific set of steps that you should be following when you're making money on the YouTube platform, which I detail over here. It's going to make your life so much easier, so much less stressful. So check out that video and I'll see you over there.